The Association of American Medical Colleges is pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on optimal strategies for your residency application with a focus on anesthesiology. We are recording and we'll make the archive available after. We will email you once we post it. We did mute all participant audio. If you need help, please send us a message. The presentation includes time for Q&A, and you may submit a question at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. To access resources, including the slides, please do click on the Handouts tab where you logged in today. I'll also post a link there into the chat box. It's now my pleasure to welcome Cynthia Hutchinson. Cynthia.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Specialty Spotlight webinar on anesthesiology. My name is Cynthia Hutchinson, and I am a Director of Engagement for Residency Programs here at the AAMC. To begin today's webinar, I wanted to take a moment to give a little background on how this series came together. Each year, we hear from applicants, advisors, and programs that there's tremendous value in having a shared space to talk about the unique aspects of applying to different specialties, especially those that are highly competitive or evolving quickly. To help meet this need, the AAMC launched the Specialty Spotlight series in partnership with specialty organizations, advisors, and program leaders. These webinars are designed to offer clear, specialty-specific guidance straight from the experts so applicants can approach the process feeling more confident and informed. We see ARIS as a connector in the residency ecosystem, and this series is one of the ways we help bridge perspectives between applicants, medical schools, and residency programs. Whether you're hearing about anesthesiology for the first time or are already on your way to applying, we hope today's session provides meaningful insight and support. We're thrilled to have you with us and excited to hear from today's speakers as they share their expertise on preparing for a career in anesthesiology. This recorded webinar includes a brief overview of the AAMC and updates pertinent to applicants for a given field. So for today, anesthesiology. After the AAMC and ARIS updates, I will pass it off to Dr. Goldstein at Johns Hopkins University, representing the medical student advisor perspective. Following Dr. Goldstein will be Drs. Walpole, Program Director at Johns Hopkins University, and Dr. DeToy, Program Director at University of Nebraska Medical Center, to represent the Program Director's perspective. We will conclude the webinar with a discussion session that begins with some questions we received at time of registration and then move on to questions asked during the webinar. The Q&A feature is open, and we do have folks ready to answer your questions throughout the webinar. We likely won't be able to answer all the questions that have been previously posed or submitted today, but we are doing our best to answer as many as we can. We will also be providing helpful links and a copy of the slides used today, along with the recorded webinar. Feel free to refer back to this material and visit the anesthesiology page for medical students and applicants once this information is posted. We'll drop the link to the ASA Medical Student Resources now in the chat. Many of you have likely heard of the AAMC, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce just a few facets of the programs and support we provide the academic medicine community before moving on to my ARIS updates for the upcoming cycle. The AAMC is a nonprofit association created to lead and serve the academic medicine community since our founding in 1876. Our mission is to improve the health of people everywhere. That is why our association supports over 450,000 members of the community, from medical students to program leadership to deans and DIOs. More recently, it's important to point out the AAMC is leading the efforts to fight against NIH funding cuts, so to protect the valuable research and education these funds provide and service to patients everywhere. The AAMC, through the integration of ARIS and other partnership data, supports applicants' journey through the transition to residency. It's not simply a transactional step, but rather part of an overall offering through the AAMC and others. And we are focused on strengthening the support to applicants, programs, institutions, and specialties. ARIS was built by and accountable to the whole community. These products are not built in isolation. All recent updates to my ARIS came from stakeholder input, feedback, and research, including 40+ working group meetings and inputs from thousands via surveys, one-on-one meetings, and focus groups. The same approach is used to develop the other services around ARIS, including the Dean's Workstation and Residency Explorer tool. I'd like to take a moment to highlight the Residency Explorer tool before we move on. The Residency Explorer tool is co-sponsored by multiple national organizations involved in the transition to residency. The tool empowers students to find programs that align with their needs and interests and assess their competitiveness. 71% of applicants use this tool in completing their MyAris application to compare programs based on program characteristics like educational offerings, benefits, and current resident class demographics. We'll drop the link to Residency Explorer tool in the chat now. This tool continues to be highly utilized for comparing programs and assessing one's competitiveness while forming program lists for sending in applications. The AAMC's Admissions and Selections R&D team is innovating the tool based on community feedback. Speaking of, this summer the tool is expanding based on your valuable feedback to include increased specialty coverage from 25 to 40 plus specialties, enhanced program-specific details, including application and match services used, interview format and eligibility requirements, integration of Step 2 CK and Level 2 CE score ranges for applicants previously invited to interview, and expanded NRMP program position data. As part of our commitment to improving the recruitment process for all, the AAMC began exploring with specialty leaders how specialty-specific customizations can help students share their interests and commitment to a specialty so that programs can better select candidates for interview. From these collaborations have come many pilot studies over the last cycle, and this year we continue this effort with one update that spans all specialties and two important pilot features within the anesthesiology community. We will review those now. First is a change to the interruptions or extensions section of the MyAris application. In previous cycles, this section was one question. This year, in the 2026 ARIS application, this section separates academic and professional interruptions and extensions, and professional extensions, leaves, and gaps into two separate questions based on MSPE template language. If an applicant clicks yes, the system will prompt for an explanation. If an applicant clicks no, they will not be prompted for additional information. If you're not sure how to fill out these questions, please contact your student affairs or medical student office for guidance. Second is program signal participation and what that means for anesthesiology program applicants. During the 2026 ARIS cycle, applicants will have 15 program signals to use, 5 of which are gold and 10 are silver. As a reminder, program signals are a way for applicants to show true interest at time of application. For this reason, the AAMC recommends signaling all programs for which you have true interest, including home programs and programs to which you rotated for an away or audition rotation. One thing that has not changed from previous cycles is that once you submit your application with a signal, the signal cannot be taken back. It is permanent. So we recommend double checking program signal status after August 20th and before you begin to submit applications on September 3rd to assure each signal is used in a productive way. New this year is a pilot for program signal explanations. The program signal explanation is a very short, concise opportunity to help programs understand your specific interest in their program. It is limited to 300 characters, which is about 75 words. The program signal statement is engineered to allow personalized statements to each program you intend to signal at time of application. Each unique program you signal will only see the unique signal statement you craft specifically for them. This feature will open to applicants on June 27th. If you have a program signal saved to an anesthesiology surgery program, you will be prompted to complete the program signal explanation prior to submitting the application on or after September 3rd. As the statement is required, you will not be able to submit your application until a statement is entered into the box. Let's take a look at how program signals were utilized by applicants last year. In the 2025 ARIS cycle, the top 5 factors influencing signals, as reported by anesthesiology applicants, were geographic location, perceived chance of interview offers or matching, and close proximity to friends and family, as well as perceived fit. 90% of anesthesiology applicants last year agreed that program signals did reflect their true preference at time of application. In terms of geographic preferencing, anesthesiology remains participating in it. For geographic preferencing and similar to program signals, 90% of applicants last year also agreed the U.S. Census districts they preference were a true reflection of their interest at time of application. Moving on to the second and final pilot feature for anesthesiology applicants in this upcoming recruitment cycle, I want to touch on specialty-specific questions. This feature is being piloted by anesthesiology, neurological surgery, and integrated plastic surgery programs. Unlike program signal explanations, the responses to the 3 specialty-specific questions are not unique to each program. All anesthesiology programs will see the same responses to these 3 questions. If you are cross-applying to other specialties, such as general surgery, the other specialty programs will not see these questions or your responses. The responses to each of these questions are limited to 500 characters or approximately 100 words. The questions are featured in the 2026 MyAris applicant worksheet, which we will drop a link to in the chat now. The worksheet is a great place to draft your responses before entering and saving them in your application. Note that responses to these 3 questions are required, thus you will not be able to submit your applications until the questions are answered. Once an application is submitted, the responses will be locked in and cannot be changed. Now let's put together all of these features in a timeline for the upcoming recruitment cycle. On June 4th, the 2026 ARA season officially began. On June 27th, the program signal explanation feature will open for applicants applying to anesthesiology. In June and August, Residency Explorer tool data updates and refreshes with the additional information we previously mentioned. On August 20th, that's the last day for programs to opt out of signals. So if you're looking at a program signal status after this date, you can be assured the information is accurate for planning out your program signal strategy. On September 3rd, you can begin submitting applications and associated signals to programs. Take the time between August 20th and September 3rd to double check signal status before submitting applications. And we all know what occurs after that. Lots of interviews and decisions being made, and we at the AAMC wish you all the best of luck during this process. Last but not least, there is a wealth of resources available at the AAMC. Feel free to snap a photo of these QR codes for reference later or to peruse our site anytime for more information. I will now pass off to Dr. Goldstein for the medical student advisor perspective.
Thanks, Cynthia, and welcome everyone. As Cynthia said, I'm Mitchell Goldstein. I'm the Director of Advising at Johns Hopkins. Any of the applicants on, I just want to congratulate you for being here. This is such an exciting time, and certainly we understand that there's a lot of stress implicit with that, and so hopefully this will quell some of that stress. Next slide. So I think the first thing that everybody should be thinking about as they prepare for the application is a couple of things. One is get your CV in tip-top shape. It will not only be helpful to you as you start meeting with your letter writers, but it will also be a key feature in actually getting your application together for ERAS. Many folks will find that they can do a lot of cutting and pasting, and so getting your CV in a place where it is ready to go really should be one of the first things that you do as you prepare for the season. The other thing that you really should do is, make a time for you to really think about and reflect on you. Really think about what is it that you're marketing as you approach applying this season. You represent a brand, and so that brand should be something that you've thought very carefully about. And so reflecting on what is your past? How did you get here? What are the themes that were important for your success? What experiences in your past have gotten you here? What's the present? Like, why anesthesia? Why now? How did you come to that term? Really getting a sense of what you want to convey as far as that journey from the past to the present. And then lastly, what does it look like for you, at least in your mind right now, for the future? How do you envision who you are at the end of training. And really making time to make those careful considerations will make organizing the components of your application much better. That organization and careful thinking is really important before you even decide to start populating the various components of the application. It's really important to think about, what do I want to convey? How do I want to convey that? And how do the various components of the application allow for someone who is evaluating me to understand who I am? And so I would say to you, the various components of the application that you're going to hear about, each of them is an opportunity. And I would really consider that carefully for you to tell your story and for you to command the narrative. And think very carefully about how you're going to utilize each of those components to do so. Next slide. So when you think about your experiences, this is a really important aspect of telling your narrative. So the first thing I would recommend, as has already been described, is download the ERAS applicant worksheet. Start there prior to actually going digital and going into the actual portfolio. What we want you to do is we want you to think about all the experiences that got you to this point. We want you to then prioritize those experiences. We want you to think about, what are those experiences that are most prominent in telling your narrative? Which of those experiences have longitudinal threads? Which of those experiences really reflect who you are, your core values, your interests, your commitment, your leadership? Those are the things that people are really going to be looking for. It's not so important the content of the experience, but more, what was your involvement? If it's something that you've been involved with for many, many years, that's really important. If it's something that you led or you innovated, that's very important. And certainly there should be a connection to, how does this experience relate to the next part of your trajectory, that of residency? It's not required, but there should be at least some connection that you can make if you're asked about it during an interview. And what I would say to you is, as you choose those experiences, make sure that you feel comfortable discussing that experience on an interview. Anything is fair game. And so if it's something that brings up, something for you emotionally, and that's going to be hard for you, then maybe that's not an appropriate experience to think about. As you sort of develop the whole list, then you're going to need to decide, what are my 10 that I'm going to select to highlight? Again, I think those 10 should be things that highlight commitment, leadership, longitudinal involvement, core values, but also think about how you might group experiences. If you have more than 10, is there a way to group those that are advocacy related under one sort of global experience to be able to get more bang for the buck? And as you think about what you're going to highlight as most meaningful, again, it's really about going back to thinking about, who are you? Who are you as you want the brand to be known? And what of these experiences best highlights that? I would say to you, discuss your list with your friends, your family, but certainly with your advisors, your specialty mentors, and other faculty members who know you well. I think sometimes you have to get outside of yourself and get the sort of thoughts of others to help prioritize that list. Next slide. The personal statement is also an important aspect of the application. And again, what is the purpose of the personal statement? It is to highlight your unique journey. It is to tell your narrative. It's to give your perspective. It's to frame your greatest strengths and accomplishments. It's to explain things that are otherwise not obvious. This is a place where, if there's anything in the application that might make someone scratch their head, it is your job to use the personal statement to explain that. And certainly, this is an area where programs will assess fit with you to their program. And so really being thoughtful about what to include in the personal statement is very important. Next slide. So as you think about your personal statement, first, make sure the message fits with the rest of the application. I think that should be really, again, there should be an overlap of messaging and really so that it feels like the narrative is the same in the components of the application. Certainly incorporate some gentle creativity so that you keep the attention of the application reviewer, but don't go overboard. And I'll talk about that in a second. Certainly sharing how you uniquely will contribute and enhance is important. Make sure that it's well written, that it's not too long, one page only. That certainly it doesn't have any grammatical errors. Those will be things that will be glaring for a reader. Maintain a positive light as you might explain unfortunate situations. Make sure you talk about your resiliency, what you learned, and how you will utilize that to be that much better of a resident. Next slide. What you should not do. Don't waste the personal statement. Don't retell your CV. Don't retell the experiences. That will be present in the other components of the application. So again, rehashing it here, not so helpful. Don't use creativity to the extreme so that it distracts from the focus of the statement or makes someone think you're weird. Again, we're not looking for very carefully narrated, pieces of prose. We're looking for understanding your voice, your description. Don't go into details about the field, how you sort of love the field and why you love the field. Everybody reading the narrative is going to love the field. They're going to be anesthesiologists. And so just getting into the details, not at all helpful. Don't use humor. I think this is one of those things that humor is so personal and you just don't know how it will strike for any given individual. So it's better to stay away from that. Also, stay away from quotes, obscure references. Again, this is not about you sort of referencing someone else. This is your narrative. As I said, reviewing your weaknesses, making sure that any of those question marks that somebody might have as they read your application are addressed here, but again, in a positive light with mentions of lessons learned, road traveled. And again, be sure not to include things in the personal statement that you would not want to discuss in an interview as well. Next slide. So thinking about how to go about this sort of, big process of selecting programs, what I will say is I think there are lots and lots of resources, and I would encourage you all to utilize these resources. Some of them have been talked about by my colleague prior, but certainly there's lots of great information in the Fellowship and Residency Electronic Interactive Database. Certainly Residency Explorer has lots of very important information for you to assess how do you sort of look compared to other applicants for this given program. Texas Star gives a different sort of version of that. But I will also say, utilize those people who know you. Utilize your advisors. They can certainly help you think about things like culture and fit and what you sort of may meld with a given program or not. Current residents are absolutely important. They know the programs that you're looking at. And so getting sort of the perspective of people that are experiencing those programs now, super valuable. Alumni. So hopefully each of your medical schools keeps a careful alumni database of where people went after med school. And those folks also can be unbelievably helpful as you're looking. Certainly program websites and program social media accounts also offer the program's perspective. Next slide. So as you develop your program list, there is not one way to do this. Each of you has a very different need for training and a very different potential assessment of fit for any given program. So what I would say to you is the way you approach this is not going to be the way that your colleague in the same medical school approaches this. Utilize the AAMC CIM residency preference exercise. It's a really nice way to organize your thoughts and give you at least an initial plan for developing that list. Consider yourself specifically. Who are you? Again, what does that mean as far as fit? And what do you bring as far as how competitive you are for various types of programs? And utilize the databases that we described. Next slide. As you begin to think about all of the things that I've already talked about, looking at websites, talking to alumni, talking to people who know you best, then it's going to be important for you to be very strategic about how you decide on signals. And that should be based on both your desire to be at a given program, but at the same time, what the likelihood of that working for you with respect to your competitiveness. And what I would say is, talk with those people in the field who you know and respect and can be honest with you. And they can help you really think carefully about, does what you've decided make sense? Next slide. So obviously there's lots of things to consider. And I would say there is no good reason to forfeit anything that's important to you. Maybe geography is the most important thing as you think about thriving in residency. Then that's okay. You need to know what's going to be important for you to thrive. And if being close to a loved one or making sure that you're with your significant other is the leading force, that's okay. Certainly, there are others of you who may want very specific clinical experiences, very specific research experiences, and that may trump some of the other factors that are on this slide. That's also okay. So again, I think there's lots of things to consider, and for each of you, those considerations will be different. And again, utilizing your own reflection of what's important, how you prioritize, will help you to think about programs that are right for you. Next slide. So all of this is going to lead to some great opportunities to interview at programs. And so as you are preparing your application, recognize that next step of interviews and remind yourself as you're preparing your application that whatever you put in the application is likely going to be talked about by somebody on the interview trail. So as you're formatting your three most memorable experiences, as you're crafting your narrative and your personal statement, think about that carefully. As you're preparing for interview, I can't stress enough, know your application. Know every aspect of your application. Make sure that if you have a research experience that you've highlighted in your application, you know what's happened to that research. You know sort of, what the next sort of steps are, even if you left it a couple or more years ago. I would also say practice is everything. And so as many mock interviews that you can do prior to the actual real thing, the better. And again, mock interviews with those people that are specialty specific and mock interviews with people who may not be specialty specific, but are really good coaches at interview technique, certainly beneficial. And I would encourage you to utilize the resources of your institutions to practice, practice, practice. Next slide. For those advisors on the call, again, you are invaluable to students. And I can't say this enough. You don't necessarily have to be a specialty expert in every anesthesia program, but you really can be that sort of holistic resource for your students to help them as they craft their application, to familiarize them with the resources that they'll be utilizing and contextualizing the information in those resources, to really create a safe space so that students can talk about those things that they may be nervous to talk about to the specialty specific advisors. They certainly are going to rely on you as another eye as they create their profile within ERAS, as they create their personal statement. And again, I think your tracking of their progress to make sure that they're on track for all the milestones in the application process, and then as they are offered interviews, tracking where they are and advocating for them if there is a little bit of a stumble, all those things will be super important to your anesthesia applicants. Next slide. And certainly there are a lot of specialty specific resources and networking opportunities that are also helpful. And so this slide just gives a few of them. I am going to pass the baton now to my colleagues, Dr. Walpaugh and Dr. Dutoit.
All right. Hello, everybody. Dr. Wolpaw and I are going to get started. We put together some just general guidelines for you guys. So I guess we'll go to next slide and start there. So both of us are representative of the Association of Anesthesiology Core Program Directors. Dr. Wolpaw is the current president, and I'm the president-elect. And what this group of program directors is basically the anesthesia core program directors that are here to mentor other program directors and support each other from a programmatic standpoint and advance our field and the quality of training programs. We help make a lot of the decisions for the application process. So we've both been very involved in the last several years of signaling and ARIS applications and many of these things. So we've been doing our best to answer your questions in the chat, and hopefully more will get answered here. Next slide.
So what we're showing, let me add my hellos and welcome you all. It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many of you here. As Andrea said, we tried to answer a lot of them. We're probably going to be doing less of that now that we're talking to you in the chat, but we will have some chance to answer live as well. So what you're seeing here is the data in terms of positions offered and filled. There are 3 types there in case that's not obvious to people. C are categorical spots. So those are spots that, as you're probably familiar with, you do an intern year and your 3 years of clinical anesthesia training all in the same place without changing locations. A is for advanced. Those are positions where you match and you will then do an intern year somewhere else. And then you will go into your 3 years of anesthesia training at the place that you have matched into for anesthesia. And R are the least common. That stands for reserved for physician only. Those are spots where if you match into a spot this March, you would start as a PGY2 right away in July. So it means you've already done an intern year or more. Sometimes those are for people who've already done an entire residency in something else in the United States, and you don't need an intern year. So you are just going to go straight into residency. So those are, some programs have none of those, some have a few. So that varies, and those are the least common. And then you see for different, for DOs, for IMGs, and for MD graduates, the overall numbers down there at the bottom. Next slide.
So some recommendations just generally on the applications, and I know that Dr. Goldstein already kind of went over some of this, but from an anesthesia standpoint, we want you to focus on when you give your 10 experiences, quality over quantity. I want to hear about those things that you're passionate about and that you took a leadership role in, that you initiated. Not only just what it, please also like list what it is and explain why it's meaningful, not just maybe like if I don't, at my institution, might not know what your abbreviations are or what little things you are. So please be explanatory, and I guess that meaningful and quality component is very important. Publications, there's lots of questions about this, but number one is you need to be prepared to discuss anything that you put on that list, right? And what we have here is that meaningful, and same thing with the experiences, meaningful contribution in a lower number is way more valuable than being part of the 20 author group of a big lab that churns and burns out papers, right? We want to know who you are and what you bring to the table. So your list may not be as long, but if it's meaningful and you are involved and made a meaningful change, those are also helpful. We went over specialty specific questions a little bit. We think these are very important. We don't need to hear the same things that are on your personal statement. This is another opportunity to show you another piece of yourself. So please don't put the same story in all the things, because you're not taking the opportunity to show us who you are. And then for the signal statement, like was said earlier, we really just want residents that want to be at our program. All right. That's like, if you ask any program director, that's what they want. So the better you can be at explaining why a certain institution flagged your radar, the better the program director will understand who you are and what you're going to bring to the program. Next slide.
And I'll just add, thank you, Andrea. Totally agree with everything Andrea just said. I will add that the application, I think, does 2 things, and I think a lot of program directors would agree. One is that obviously tells us about you, and as Andrea said, it's absolutely, we want to learn about you. But the other is it tells us how meticulous and careful a person you are. So if you, in your signal statement, say, I want to go to Johns Hopkins because Baltimore has, nice weather, right? That clearly you didn't bother spending a lot of time looking into our program and looking at our website and deciding what really appealed to it about you. Similarly, if there are typos in your personal statement or in your list of activities, if you have grammatical mistakes, these things all suggest that you might not be the most careful resident. And in anesthesia, being careful is super important. And so think of it both ways. It's a chance to tell us about you, but it's also a chance to show how careful you are about important things. And that is really, really important too. All right. So about the personal statement, I think Mitch did a great job of going over a lot of important things. We'll just emphasize a couple here. One is, I know you want to tell all about you, and it's easy to write a 3 or 4 page personal statement. And it's a little harder, but still easier to write a 1.5 page personal statement. But it's really hard to write a less than 1 page personal statement, but you still have to do it. So figure out how to cut it down to less than 1 page. It is going to pay off. People will be more likely to read it carefully, and they will appreciate that you were respectful of their time and that you got it down to less than 1 page. You might have to cut out a story you were going to tell, but this is also where editors can help. Ask people to read and help you edit your personal statement to get it down and to make sure you have not made any spelling or grammatical mistakes, that it reads well. You should have at least 3 people, maybe more, read it and very carefully give you feedback on it. We like to say, and it is important, you should not spend any of your less than 1 page space saying anesthesiologists take care of patients in the OR, they do procedures, and they also are like the intensivist of the OR. They know so much about physiology, and right, you don't do any of that. We all know what anesthesiologists do. Every single person who's going to read your personal statement is an anesthesiologist. So you should talk about you. What makes you a unique person? And what draws you to anesthesiology, and how will those connect? How will you be and how will you be a good anesthesiologist? But don't then say it's because anesthesiologists do this. Just say what you are going to do. Be clear about your goals, right? Where do you want to go? Again, this takes some time. Why are you applying in anesthesiology? What is it about anesthesia that draws you? And where do you want to go in your career? That's both going to be in your now supplemental question about how you see your job as statement. And I agree with what Andrea said before. I would not cut and paste. That will not look good if you just cut and paste from one to the other. So it's fine if you're saying the same themes, but the little question is going to be very short. That's 100 words. So you can expand on that and make sure you're not just cut and paste. And then a lot of people will go have a final paragraph that says, this is what I'm looking for in a program. I want a program that will give me X, Y, and Z. That's fine. You can say that. But remember, you are applying to a program that is interviewing hundreds and has thousands of applications for a few number of spots. Why should they take you? What are you going to offer? Are you offering someone who is going to be a hard worker, that has an impressive work ethic, that is going to be able to give back, right? So think about not just what you want, but what you have to offer in exchange. Next slide.
Fantastic. We'll talk a little bit. I know there were some questions about letters of recommendation, right? And this is a hard one because, again, we have a very diverse programmatic field. So some program directors may feel differently than others, but in general, you've got to have 3. When you submit on September 24th, or before that, we know that that's not up to you, but please send gentle reminders to people that you have asked to get letters, because having 3 in there when it opens is very helpful, because sometimes it comes up as an incomplete application and you don't want to miss that initial opening review. 4 is better, and it's just because I would say the vast majority of people have 4, and it's one more opportunity for somebody to speak on your behalf and describe their interaction with you, and they really know you on a personal level. We want at least 1 clinical anesthesia letter, right? We understand that anesthesia is kind of like a group. You don't necessarily have a million rotations or spend a ton of time, and that you need some characteristics of an internist and some characteristics of a surgeon. There's many aspects of many different fields. So I don't think that you have to have all anesthesia letters. In fact, me personally, I kind of like when there's a surgeon who loved working with you and wished you were doing surgery, and an intensivist that felt the same way. Those are really, really additive. So while we do want 1 clinical anesthesia letter, and definitely at least 1 other clinical letter, the breadth and the depth of the story that your letter writers can tell you is more important than having them all be in the field of anesthesiology. Some of you will come from places that have department chair, program director letters that are organized at a way that are institutional. Those are nice. Those are usually people that are kind of looking at trainees all the time and can kind of reflect on what values you bring in that they see will be successful. They're not required because not everybody has that opportunity. So don't stress out if that's something that you don't have. But if you're a part of an institution that does, definitely participate in that process. Really, I mean, we see this every year. Like some people do a lot of research or a lot of other things, and those letters are value added. But you don't really need like 3 of those letters, right? You want to think of the letters also as displaying your different characteristics and the breadth of your characteristics. And when you take one aspect of yourself and you give 3 letters to it, we don't get to know you better. We maybe hear the same thing over and over and over in those 3 letters. And I think that every program director would agree with this. I would rather have someone who knows you well and can tell you a unique story, who maybe isn't like the professor of, whatever in medicine, right? But who knows you well and can tell you a better story. When I read a lot of letters every single year, and I can tell the ones that actually know the person. So don't think that you have to get the person that you worked with once that has the right credentials. I'd rather hear from the person who you worked with every single day on medicine wards and really knows who you are as a clinician. Next slide.
Yeah, agree with everything there. And I'll just emphasize that this is another one of those kind of hidden messages in the application. I think that if you only have 3 letters, are you someone who is just doing the minimum, right? I mean, again, think about the message it sends. And there's no one who has done 4 years of medical school who should not be able to get 4 letters. Doesn't have to be 4 anesthesia letters by any means. But if you can draw from anyone you've worked with clinically, anyone you've done research with, any advisor who knows you, right? So to only have 3, to me, raises a little question of, is this someone who just does the minimum, or what's going on here? So I highly encourage you to have 4, even though your application is considered complete at 3. All right, signals. So this is, of course, the new era we live in. You really need to assess your own competitiveness. A lot of the questions that we just answered in writing had to do with this. Step 2 is, unfortunately, it is what it is, the most important thing. It's the only objective thing left. Grades are maybe somewhat objective, but a lot of schools don't have grades anymore. And even those that do have grades, it's a little unclear sometimes how many people are getting honors in any given clerkship. And so, it's hard to use those as much, though I think if you have them, they certainly do matter. So step 2 is very important. The medical school you come from, somebody asked about that. I do think that plays a role. It's probably not overwhelming, and certainly you can match in an excellent anesthesia program, even if you're not from a top medical school, if you have stood out and really distinguished yourself. The leadership you have, the research you've done. So all of these things you need to look at with advisors, hopefully people who know the system and who have advised people in this before, and get a feel for how competitive you are. That's going to help you determine. And just as an example, if you are someone who's really ultra competitive, okay, and I mean you have a 270 on step 2, you have all honors if your school gives honors, you've got at least a first author publication or 2, you've been the president of a club, you maybe have another degree, or were a Division I varsity athlete, or you were had commendations in the military, right? You're an MD, PhD. All these things together would make you a truly top stellar applicant. By no means do you need to be that person. But if you are, you can send your signals anywhere you want, right? And you're going to be fine. Although I will say, ironically, that person might not get interviews at places they send silver signals, because if they send a silver signal to a top place, that place may not be interviewing any silver signals. And so that person may not get it. That person also doesn't need to worry about that, because they're going to match at one of their top 5 places, probably their top place. If, on the other hand, you have a 225 on step 2 and everything else is, okay, but not great, you need to really, that's the other extreme, and you need to be thinking about sending those signals to the least competitive places that you can find, if it's still important to you to match in anesthesiology. And so you need to find places, again, as I said in the chat, be a little careful with Residency Explorer, because the idea, when it says a place, like UCLA, for example, if you look, I believe it will say that they interviewed a fair number of people with no signals. But that's because they, at least in the past, maybe that will change, they did not require their own students, or maybe even people who did away rotations, to send a signal at all to get an interview. So that's a little misleading. So, you want to try to get a feel any way you can of what are places that maybe interview people without signals, places that maybe have been less competitive traditionally, maybe newer programs or brand new programs, right? These are the kind of places you might want to think about signaling. And then if you're in between, you want to split your signals. So, you know, send a gold signal or two to a top place, but also send 2 or 3 of them to less competitive places, and same with your silver signals, okay? There are definitely programs that will only interview you with a gold signal, and so be careful about that. And if you really want a shot at those programs, you need to send a gold signal. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Jed. I was gonna add just a couple things about program signaling is that it's not a game. It's meant to help you, right? It's meant to help you get where you want to go to. And a lot of people, when they're listening to this, they just get anxious about doing the right thing, right? How do I game the system, right? We want to help you get to the places you want to go to. And the gold and silver signal system helps us identify who really wants to be at our programs, right? And that's why they're treated as such, right? So, a less competitive applicant who gold signals a program is going to get twice the look, right? Just because, hey, I'm going to give this person, you know, like a little bit, their numbers are just ever so slightly lower, or their application, but they really want to be at my program. And most program directors feel that way. And so it's not a game. It's meant to help you tell us where you want to be and help you get there. I think that's a good reminder when it feels like there's a lot of pressure. And geographic preferencing is the same way. There's not a game to this, right? If possible, please choose. It's nice to see regional overlap between the places that you're giving signals, but that's not always possible given the like divisions and the density of the programs and stuff like that, right? But what we want to hear from is where you really want to go. I would say compared to the program signals, geographic preferencing has a lot less impact. We do know a couple program directors that like really like their geo-preferencing for say, but a lot of programs, the program signals are the trump card, and then they'll look at the geo signals as just another piece of the puzzle, right? So don't spend a lot of time stressing about geographic signaling. It does, the data has kind of shown out, at least for anesthesia, that is unless you truly, genuinely just want to opt out and say, I have no preference, I'll go anywhere, which may be applicable to you, even if it does help you a little bit to try and overlap as much as possible with those programs that you want to go to. So if you're just stuck in the middle, it's not a downside to no preferencing, but you can get a little bit more edge if you just capture most of your signals in those geo-preferencing areas. Next slide.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, you know, what I tell people, take it or leave it, is if you look at your signals, you look at where you're planning a signal, and if they are scattered over more than 3 geographic areas, especially if your gold signals are scattered over more than 3, which is really unusual, but if it is true, I would seriously think about opting out and explaining and saying, you know, I'm opting out because I have absolutely no preference. I will go anywhere for excellent, you know, for the best training program for me. So, but if you can fit all your signals into 3 geographic regions, then you might as well signal those 3. All right, interview prep. I can't emphasize this enough. Your interview is all about interpersonal skills, right? We can tell from your application how well you do at school. We've got, to the extent that you have grades, we've got those, your scores. So we're not looking to be like, oh, you know, they sound smart. What we're looking for is, are you somebody who, if you and I took a 24-hour call together, that I would be like, and I saw that on the call sheet, I looked and I saw, oh, it's Andrea and me for 24 hours. I'd be like, yes, right? Thank goodness I'm with Andrea, you know, this fabulous resident who I get to now work with and spend this 24 hours with, and I can count on her, and she's going to be someone who's easy to talk to and get along with. You know, think about this much like, are you somebody who people are going to say, yeah, I'd love to like grab a beer with them, or to, you know, have lunch with and chat for a while. So that's what you need to convey. Now, for some people, that's really easy. That's just who you are. You're smiley. You're someone who's, you know, very interpersonally skilled. Others of you may know about yourself that, you know, you might be a fabulous person and a really smart person, but maybe it takes you a little while for people to figure that out. Like maybe you're a little quiet or shy or awkward at first, and then over time, that you warm up and you're fabulous. Okay, like I have a daughter like this. Okay, who like she's a little shy, and you would think she's like super meek and shy until she gets to know you, and then she's, you know, very, very talkative and very great. So that's what you want to be able to figure out. If you know that about yourself, you've got to practice a million times on Zoom with a friend, with a colleague, with a professor, until you can feel like you can just get over that nervousness, smile, laugh appropriately if somebody, says something that you should laugh at, but just be that person as much as you can who is easygoing and comfortable to be across from. Okay. As silly as it sounds, you may want to practice smiling. Like, that doesn't come naturally to everybody on Zoom, but you may need to practice it, right? Have somebody talk to you and just practice smiling appropriately and ask them, like, how did I do? So that's the best advice I can give you. It does matter. And again, a 15, 20-minute Zoom interview is not a lot of time. So you don't have time to warm up. You've got to be ready to do this. And just like you would practice for an oral board exam, you should practice for your interviews.
My only other added piece of advice, because I thoroughly agree with Jed, is that we want to also be careful for those of you that are incredibly high achieving, right? Arrogance of any sort or can come across a Zoom interview, and it's a huge red flag for many people, right? You are talking to people who are leading their field, who are experts in their field. And every year I interview people that almost disrespect me when I'm talking to them and cut me off and do those kind of like very odd, and it can be a red flag. So you also want to make sure that's the practice piece. Not only you have to be interactive, but you have to be careful about the way you come across. And that's something that someone can help you with.
Absolutely. And I'll add, Mitch said before, be careful with humor, especially in your personal statement. And I would say the same thing here. You want to be able to smile and laugh appropriately, but I would not try to make your interviewer laugh, right? Don't tell jokes. It's just too risky. It might work, but it might not. And so that's not what you want to do. When I say smile, I don't mean be goofy. I mean, be friendly, right? And so absolutely. And Andrea's right. Don't interrupt your interviewer. Don't try to, kind of, certainly don't like call them out and, say like, well, actually, that's not what that was about, right? I mean, you want to be someone would say, what a wonderful, that was just really fun and comfortable to talk to that person. All right, next slide.
Perfect. We have another list of helpful links as much as possible. Our group that with the AACPD puts together specific, exhaustive kind of recommendations that we posted on our website, links on the ARIS website, and links on the as we're trying to provide you as much resources as possible. Dr. Wolpaw has a podcast. We've done several podcasts on signaling and anesthesia applications. I think last year still applies to this year. So if you haven't looked at that, that's also another good resource that people like listening to podcasts.
Amazing. And thank you to all of our speakers today. We appreciate you so deeply in your time. It is time for the discussion and question portion of our time together, and I'm happy to moderate some of these questions that we have come in. We are going to start with a few questions that came in during the registration process. Again, we had almost 900 registrants, so there were a lot of questions. We did our best to grab some questions that were common. So we'll begin with those, and I will start with the first one. The first one is, what makes an anesthesia applicant stand out the most on paper besides a good step 2 or a level 2 score?
So
Yeah,
Dr. Wolpaw, yeah, I forget. Dr. Wolpaw talked a little bit about this in our slides, but right, there's lots of, and it's hard. We're trying to like get a snippet of who you are and take that forward and make decisions. But I think the way you express yourself, the way you put meaning into your descriptions, the things that you describe, right, leadership opportunities, telling us like kind of what you do with your time and how you value it, right? Obviously, if you've done really, really well on grades and you've been the leader of many things, that obviously helps you stand out. Not everybody has those things. So sometimes people say, should I include this? It's not like necessarily related to anesthesia, but if it describes who you are and the type of person you are, I think that that's very helpful in helping you stand out and bringing a unique aspect to your application.
Yep.
Dr. Wolpaw, do you want to add?
No, I agree with that completely, right? I mean, as I said in the typed answer, for better or for worse, step 2 score is going to be the most influential, and that may be grades if you have them. Other than that, everything else is a compilation. And so you want to be very clear about what you've done in your experiences, be concise, right? Remember, people are reading maybe thousands of these. So you want to be very clear and concise, but make it clear why it was important to you. And the whole idea is to tell the story of you. So how does this help us understand you a little better? And the better picture we can get about that, and the more impressive a picture that is, the better for you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Walpole to continue on this one. It's about geographic preferencing. We actually got a lot of questions about geo-preferencing also live today. So we'll start with these two questions, and then I'll add some more in towards the end. How important is being in-state student to residency programs, and how important is geo-preferencing or mentioning a specific location in my application?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for every program, but I don't think there are many programs who want in-state people just for in-state's sake. I think that the reason traditionally some programs favor people in-state is because they think you're more likely to actually go there if offered a spot. Where in the era of signaling, especially the gold signals, that's not an issue. They know if you're going to spend one of your precious 5 gold signals on them, you're going to seriously consider going there. So I wouldn't worry about that. And if you are not in, like, I wouldn't think you can't gold signal a place out of state. I think you absolutely can and should, if that's the program you want to signal. And then I think we talked about geographic signaling, but I would look at that second part of this question in 2 ways. As for geographic signaling, again, if you can get all your signals, your gold and silver signals into 3 geographic areas, great, do it. If not, I would consider either, if there's like one outlier, maybe don't worry about it, but if it's all over the place, consider just opting out of geographic signaling. And then in terms of about talking about it, this gets back to the question of both your signal statement and personalizing your personal statement. So in your signal statement, part of that should absolutely be not only why you want to come to Hopkins, but why do you want to be in Baltimore, right? I mean, that should both be. So do you have a significant other or a family member? Is it a place you visited as a kid? What is it about Baltimore that's appealing to you? And you want to be clear about that. And then if you're going to personalize your personal statement, which honestly, I think it's less important now that there's a signal statement, but I would probably still do it. It's not going to hurt, for sure. It's not going to hurt, and it may help. So then again, talk a little bit more, right? Like what about the program and what about the place is appealing to you?
Awesome, that's very helpful. And I think that hit most of the questions that were open in the chat. Just to kind of reiterate some of the themes, it sounded like it's a really good idea to use program signal explanations to, if you have a particular interest in a city, my fiance is moving there, or I have all of my entire family there. That's important to the program, just as important as it is to say, I have no geographic preference whatsoever. I'm not going to choose a division. I'm interested in Johns Hopkins. I'm interested in the University of Nebraska, and using my program signal explanations to say why that program. So it really helps for both instances there. Awesome. Okay, moving to the next one. For this one, we'll start with Dr. Dutoit, and then we'll go to Dr. Goldstein. How can an applicant address a gap between medical school and residency of, let's say, a year versus longer than that, 5 years or more?
I think the best advice is to actually just let it not be a mystery, right? Program directors are trying to look at the information provided in ARIS and put a timeline together. Where is this person from? Where have they come from? What have they gone through? What are they bringing to the table? And too often I see it where there's an obvious gap and I have no idea what they did during that time. So you want to address it in one of the many opportunities. It can be in the experiences section. It can be in the impactful experience. It can be in the answer to one of the questions. It can be in your personal statement, but it needs to not be a mystery. And it needs to be like, I mean, if it's for something that you think is kind of a red flag, explain it. Let us know what took you through this process, right? Especially if you've got a longer gap, especially between medical school and residency, I think this is hard. It's hard to overcome, and you really want to be able to tell your story so that a program director knows what you're bringing in. If you leave it up to us to guess, we've got 100 other applicants that don't have a gap that haven't made us wonder what's going on with you. And so it's very easy to get passed over.
I agree with everything that was just said. I would just add that you can use this as an opportunity. So I think that sometimes, that road traveled may not be easily understood. And this could be like, you have a lot of grit. You've been able to overcome something that's dramatic. And any program director is going to really think carefully about someone who's been able to sort of do that. And so I would use it as an opportunity.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you guys so much. Moving on to the next one regarding publications. Again, this was another prominent question type in the live chat, and we are at one minute left, so we might not get to the next one. But what is considered a green flag versus a red flag for quantity of publications?
Yeah, I think
Dr.
Andrea.
Wolfall will start.
Yeah, I think Andrea talked about this in the main part of our presentation, and I think it came up in the written section. But I'll say that quality over quantity. So if you have a project you worked on really intensely and you got a first author publication from it, that is going to carry much more weight than if you are the 6th of 9 authors on 10 papers that were kind of churned out. So quality over quantity. And if you have, the only red flag I would say is if you had nothing. Like if you click on that little publications tab and it's 0, right? Which really, it's most people should have something, a poster, you presented an abstract, you submitted, something like that. If there's nothing there, I don't want to call it a red flag, like you can't match, but I would call it an orange flag, right? Like that does raise some questions about, because that's unusual. It's unusual to have nothing there. And then the green flag is certainly, I think, the best thing that can help you there is just some good first author publications.
And I did want to throw, I know we're out of time, but I want to throw one more thing in there, in that what I see sometimes is people trying to make themselves impressive, and they put first author of this big project, and right, and then they don't mention mentorship. They don't mention who, like, right, I know if you're a first author, that took a lot of work, but you didn't get there by yourself. And so when people claim and they're trying to, like, again, it goes back to that arrogance piece, like, right, I want to know somebody who respects and understands how they got the achievement that they got it from. And when somebody puts that and there's nobody else mentioned, like they did it all on their own, that's also a little bit cautious. Like, obviously they got there, but they don't have the insight into the value of their mentors and the community that supported them through that.
Absolutely. And I'll just add that if you list a publication on your application, you better be ready to talk very intelligently about that study. If someone asks you in an interview, oh, I see you were part of the publication of this article, tell me about that. And I've had this happen where people will say, oh, I don't really remember, right? That's a huge problem. So don't list it on there unless you are going to read that paper before your interview and be ready to talk intelligently about that paper.
Wonderful. Again, thank you to our speakers and thank you to our audience for joining with all the great questions. We have 82 answered questions to summarize in an FAQ that we will add to the recorded webinar at the end once it's uploaded. I will now turn over to Jennifer to close us out today.
Great, thanks so much. And please do give us your feedback on this session by filling out the evaluation that will pop up on your screen as soon as we end. We did record the session. We'll email you once we post the archive. On behalf of the AAMC, have a great day.